Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my HOA Karen Tales channel? Thank you so much. It all started as a simple weekend project with my daughter. Emma had just turned 10, and she was determined to earn money for a new bike. I suggested a lemonade stand, thinking it would be a fun way to teach her about entrepreneurship and responsibility. Little did I know that our innocent venture would put us in the crosshairs of Karen Williams, the dreaded HOA president of Sycamore Heights, a woman whose passion for rules was matched only by her complete lack of common sense or human empathy. Our first weekend was a smashing success. Emma's homemade lemonade, my grandmother's recipe with fresh squeezed lemons, a hint of lavender, and just the right amount of sweetness, was a hit in the neighborhood. We set up a small wooden stand that I had built with Emma in our driveway, complete with a chalkboard sign and paper cups decorated with her artwork. Neighbors stopped by, complimented her business acumen, and often paid well above our modest $1 asking price. Emma was beaming with pride, and I was a proud dad watching my daughter's confidence bloom with each transaction. By Sunday evening, she had earned $47 and was already calculating how many more weekends it would take to reach her goal of $300 for the purple mountain bike she'd been eyeing at the local shop. I should mention that I've lived in Sycamore Heights for 3 years, a planned community of identical Tudor and colonial-style homes with manicured lawns and strict regulations on everything from mailbox designs to the acceptable shade of white for window trim. I managed to stay under the HOA radar by following the rules and keeping to myself, focusing instead on raising Emma as a single dad and building my remote consulting business. I knew Karen by reputation more than personal interaction. Her infamous monthly violation notices were a neighborhood legend, often discussed in hushed tones at community barbecues. Then Monday morning came. I was working from home when the doorbell rang at precisely 9:15. Standing on my porch was Karen Williams, clipboard in hand, her blonde highlights perfectly matching her leopard print blouse. Her thin lips were pressed into what I assumed was supposed to be a smile, but looked more like she was contemplating which seasoning would make me taste better. Behind her stood a man I recognized as Greg Peters, the HOA's compliance officer, a retired accountant who seemed to find genuine joy in measuring the height of people's grass with a ruler. "I'm Karen Williams, president of the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association. We've received several complaints about your unauthorized commercial establishment," she said. I blinked in confusion. "Commercial establishment? It's just a kid's lemonade stand." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes as she flipped through pages on her clipboard with perfectly manicured nails that matched her coral blazer. Section 7, paragraph 3 of our community bylaws clearly states that no resident shall operate a business from their property without prior board approval and proper licensing. You're in violation of our covenant, which you signed when purchasing this property. "Mr. Mitchell," I tried reasoning with her. "It's just my daughter trying to earn money for a bike. She made $47 over the weekend, hardly a commercial enterprise." Most of the neighbors seemed to enjoy it. Karen's expression hardened. "The amount earned is irrelevant to the violation, Mr. Mitchell, and I assure you the complaints were numerous." "Who complained?" I asked, genuinely curious, since we'd received nothing but positive feedback. "That information is confidential, but the board takes all complaints seriously." She thrust a formal-looking notice into my hands. Section 12, paragraph 7 also prohibits unauthorized structures in the front yard. That wooden contraption must be removed immediately. Greg, who had been silently measuring the distance between my lemonade stand and the property line with a tape measure, nodded gravely. "It's also 6 inches over the permitted distance from the driveway edge. Rules are rules, Mr. Mitchell. The HOA exists to maintain property values and community standards. I'll need you to cease operations immediately or face a fine of $50 per day of violation, increasing to $100 after the first week." With that, Karen pivoted on her designer heels and marched back to her Tudor-style home 3 doors down, leaving me standing there with a citation notice in my hand. Greg lingered briefly, mumbling something that sounded almost apologetic before hurrying after her like an obedient puppy. I watched them go, noticing how Karen stopped to make notes on at least 2 other houses on her way home. When Emma came home from school that afternoon, her backpack covered in colorful pins and patches, excitement radiating from her face. I had to explain why her lemonade stand had to close. Her disappointment was palpable, and it broke my heart to see her enthusiasm deflate so quickly. But Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez, said it was the best lemonade she ever had, and Mr. Jenkins from the corner house gave me a $5 tip. He said I reminded him of his granddaughter. I pulled Emma into a hug as her eyes welled with tears. I know, sweetie. Sometimes adults make complicated rules that don't always make sense, but we have to follow them. It's not fair, she protested, her voice muffled against my shirt. Karen is mean. Sarah from school says her mom calls Karen the Wicked Witch of Sycamore Heights. I struggled not to laugh at the apt description. Well, we shouldn't call people names, but we do need to figure out another way for you to earn money for your bike. That evening, while Emma worked on her homework, I scrolled through social media, noticing several neighbors posting about how much they'd enjoyed Emma's lemonade and how disappointed they were that the stand had closed. One comment in particular caught my attention. Too bad about that lemonade stand. My company just invested in a food truck, and it's sitting on. Most weekdays, shamers nowhere for it to go. And that's when inspiration struck. The HOA had jurisdiction over our property, but they had no authority over public streets. A quick check of municipal regulations confirmed that with the proper permits, food trucks could operate on several streets near our subdivision, including the popular park just outside our neighborhood entrance where joggers, dog walkers, and families gathered daily. The next morning, after dropping Emma at school, I reached out to my neighbor Dave about his company's food truck. To my delight, he offered to let us use it for a minimal fee during weekdays when it wasn't being used for corporate events. Dave was one of many neighbors who had fallen victim to Karen's rulebook tyranny when she forced him to remove a basketball hoop that was 3 inches taller than regulation height. Consider it my contribution to the cause, Dave said with a wink when he showed me the truck, a gleaming white vehicle with serving windows and a small kitchen inside. Karen cited me last month because my garbage can was visible from the street for 6 hours instead of the permitted 4. Anything that makes her twitch gets my vote. A few days and some paperwork later, Emma's Extraordinary Elixir was born, a fully licensed mobile beverage business specializing in artisanal lemonades, iced teas, and fruit smoothies. I spent evenings creating a business plan, designing a logo featuring a cartoon lemon wearing sunglasses, and navigating the surprisingly complex world of mobile food vendor permits. The city clerk, a friendly woman named Marlene, was incredibly helpful, especially after I explained our situation and HOA shutdown. She said, stamping our final permit. My sister lives in one of those communities. Last year, they fined her for planting unauthorized vegetation in her backyard. It was tomatoes. Apparently, vegetables are deemed unsightly. I took a week of vacation to help Emma get started. We expanded her menu beyond the original lemonade, adding strawberry basil, cucumber mint, and tropical mango varieties. My brother, a chef in a downtown restaurant, helped us perfect the recipes and taught Emma about food safety and preparation. We partnered with a local bakery to offer complimentary cookies and muffins. I set up an online ordering system so nearby office workers could pre-order their drinks. Emma designed punch cards offering a free drink after 10 purchases, and we created a simple but professional menu with reasonable prices. Our first day was nerve-wracking. Emma insisted on wearing a chef's hat that was too big for her and kept slipping over her eyes. I worried no one would show up, or worse, that we'd be shut down for some unforeseen regulatory issue. But my fears were unfounded. Within an hour of opening, we had a steady stream of customers. Many were Sycamore Heights residents who had heard about the HOA incident and came specifically to support Emma. Others were visitors were attracted by our colorful signage and the enticing smell of fresh-baked cookies. Within days, we had a loyal following. Our spot near the park entrance was perfectly situated right where Sycamore Heights residents would pass on their way to and from work, and pass they did. Many stopped to express their support and purchase our beverages. Business was booming, and Emma was learning real-world skills while getting closer to her bike goal every day. She kept a chart taped inside the truck, coloring in a little more of the purple bike picture with each day's earnings. It took exactly 8 days for Karen to discover our operation. I was helping a customer when I spotted her marching toward our truck, her face contorted in what I can only describe as righteous indignation. She was wearing her standard uniform of pressed slacks and a color-coordinated blazer, with her HOA badge prominently displayed as if she were a federal agent. She cut in front of the line, earning several annoyed glances from waiting customers. "This is completely unacceptable. You're deliberately circumventing HOA regulations with this mobile eyesore." I smiled politely, maintaining my professional demeanor despite her rudeness. "Good morning, Karen. Would you like to try our new raspberry lemonade? It's today's special." Emma made it herself. Emma, who was carefully measuring ingredients behind me, waved cheerfully. "Hi, Miss Williams. We have sugar-free options, too." Karen's face flushed an alarming shade of red that clashed spectacularly with her peach blazer. "Don't play games with me. You know exactly what you're doing. You're making a mockery of our community standards. This flagrant disrespect for authority will not stand. Actually, we're operating a fully licensed business on public property. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. Now, if you're not ordering, I have customers waiting." Several people in line murmured their agreement, and one man checked his watch pointedly. Karen stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, she hissed, "This isn't over," before storming off to her luxury SUV parked illegally in a handicapped spot. As she drove away, I noticed her taking pictures of our truck with her phone, undoubtedly gathering evidence for her next attack. It wasn't over, of course. Over the next few weeks, Karen launched what can only be described as a personal vendetta against our food truck. First came the passive-aggressive posts on the community Facebook page about certain residents undermining neighborhood values and setting bad examples for children. When that didn't gain traction, in fact, it backfired when several neighbors defended us in the comments. She escalated her tactics. She tried reporting us to the health department, which resulted in an inspection that we passed with flying colors, thanks to my obsessive cleanliness and the food safety training we'd undergone. The inspector, an older gentleman with a kind smile, even purchased. I based a strawberry lemonade before leaving. "Best I've had in years," he said, leaving a generous tip in our jar. Next, Karen attempted to convince the city council to change the food truck regulations, only to discover that several council members were regular customers who particularly enjoyed our blueberry lavender lemonade. She showed up at a council meeting with a PowerPoint presentation about mobile vendor hazards and commercial intrusion in residential areas. Her proposal was politely but firmly rejected. Her frustration grew with each failed attempt to shut us down. She started parking her car near our usual spot, taking up excessive space to force us further from the park entrance. I simply moved to another location nearby and sent out a quick social media update to our followers. When she tried having her friends park there too, other neighbors began saving the spot for us, arriving early to ensure we could set up in our preferred location. Meanwhile, Emma's business continued to thrive. We expanded our hours and hired 2 part-time employees, high school students from a neighborhood who needed community service hours for their college applications. Emma had long since earned enough for her bike and was now saving for college. She insisted on opening a savings account, carefully depositing her profits each week and keeping meticulous records of expenses and earnings. Local media picked up our story. Young entrepreneur turns lemons into lemonade empire. A reporter from the city newspaper interviewed Emma, taking photos of her proudly serving customers from the truck window. The publicity only brought more customers, including people from neighboring communities who made special trips to try the now-famous lemonade. Karen's desperation reached new heights when she began telling people that our beverages contained dangerous additives and non-approved ingredients. This backfired spectacularly when we responded by posting our simple all-natural ingredient lists on a large board beside the truck, along with copies of our health department certification and business license. Sales actually increased as people became curious about what the fuss was about. One Tuesday afternoon, Karen showed up with 3 members of the HOA board, apparently hoping that strength in numbers would intimidate us. Instead, they ended up waiting in line like everyone else, and I noticed one board member, Janet, discreetly enjoying a mango smoothie around the corner. Afterward, when Karen spotted her, Janet quickly dumped the evidence in a trash can, looking like a teenager caught with contraband. You supporting their defiance? I overheard Karen hissing at Janet. I was conducting research, Janet replied weakly. Know your enemy and all that. The situation came to a head on a sweltering Saturday in July, our busiest day yet. Emma had just introduced a new watermelon mint lemonade that had proven so popular we'd already sold out twice. How to make more? We had a line 20 people deep when Karen appeared with a man in an expensive-looking suit. They bypassed the line and approached our service window, earning glares from the waiting customers. Mitchell, this is Jeffrey Barnes, my attorney. You'll be receiving a cease and desist letter for infringing on the Sycamore Heights trademark by using our community name in your marketing materials. I blinked in confusion. We've never used the Sycamore Heights name in any of our marketing. The attorney, looking somewhat uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Your online reviews specifically mention your proximity to Sycamore Heights. That constitutes unauthorized use of our registered community trademark. Emma, who had been restocking cups nearby, looked worried. I gave her a reassuring smile before responding. What Karen didn't know was that before embarking on this food truck adventure, I had consulted with my own attorney, my sister Margaret, who specializes in business law. Margaret had advised me on every aspect of our operation to ensure we were legally sound. I had her on speed dial for just such an occasion. Actually, Karen, community names aren't eligible for trademark protection under those circumstances. And even if they were, naming a nearby landmark for geographical reference falls under fair use. But feel free to send that cease and desist letter to my attorney. I handed Karen's lawyer my sister's business card, watching as he read my sister's credentials. Partner at a prestigious firm downtown that I could never afford if she weren't my sister. The attorney glanced at it, then at Karen, his expression shifting from confident to concerned. He whispered something in Karen's ear that made her face pale. But Karen wasn't finished. She raised her voice so everyone in line could hear. You may think you're clever, but this food truck is bringing down property values with its traffic and noise. I've documented everything for the Homeowners Association. Your disregard for community standards is affecting all of us. That's when Linda Johnson, our next-door neighbor and a quiet HOA board member who had been waiting in line, stepped forward. She was a retired judge who rarely spoke at community meetings, but was respected for her fairness and intelligence. Actually, Karen, the board took a vote yesterday. We've been monitoring your personal campaign against the Mitchells, including your attempts to use HOA resources for your vendetta. We've also noted that you've been selectively enforcing bylaws based on personal grudges while ignoring actual violations by your friends. Aeon's mouth opened, but no sound came out as Linda continued. The board has received numerous complaints about your leadership style, including allegations that you've been entering properties for inspections without proper notice, which is against our own bylaws. We've reviewed your recent actions, including using HOA funds to consult with an attorney without board approval, which constitutes misappropriation of community resources. By now, everyone in line was listening intently. Several people had taken out their phones, likely recording the confrontation. Karen's attorney took a step back, subtly distancing himself from his client. The board has voted to remove you as president, effective immediately, for misuse of authority. We've also voted to amend the bylaws to explicitly permit children's lemonade stands within reasonable hours, as well as to implement a new process for handling complaints that requires documentation and witness statements rather than anonymous reporting. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "About time," and another voice called out, "Free lemonade for Linda." Ken stood frozen in place, her face cycling through shock, anger, and disbelief as her carefully constructed kingdom of petty power crumbled around her. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she clutched her designer purse. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her until I remembered all the neighbors she had harassed, the children's basketball hoops she had removed, the harmless garden gnomes she had banished, and the countless other petty tyrannies she had inflicted on our community. This is outrageous, she finally sputtered, her voice cracking. You can't do this. I've dedicated years to maintaining the standards of Sycamore Heights. I protected property values. I've maintained order. Linda has simply handed her an official-looking document. It's all completely legal and in accordance with the bylaws you so frequently cite. Your personal belongings will be removed from the HOA office by the end of the day. Greg has already changed the locks. Karen's last defense crumbled. Her eyes darted around wildly, searching for allies but finding none. Even her attorney was now studying his shoes with intense interest, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. In a final desperate attempt to maintain dignity, she straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and declared, "You'll regret this, all of you. Sycamore Heights will fall into chaos without proper leadership." Then she turned and walked to her car with rigid steps, her back painfully straight as neighbors watched in silently triumphant solidarity. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them twice before managing to unlock her vehicle. As she drove away, I could see her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white.